except for Kyle Dawson and Frank Vandenbosch, who arrived in this past year, are going to be talking today. And so all of you will have an opportunity to get to know them and their research. And so obviously they're really looking for students. They have to start their labs. They really need people. And so pay particular attention. And I've put most of the new faculty members in the middle group. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide this. We have 17 actual speakers, 17 faculty members that have research opportunities for you. And we're going to divide it into 3 different time slots. The first one will go about an hour from 9 now until about 10, a little after 10, and there'll be 6 speakers. And then we'll have a coffee break for about roughly half an hour. Okay, so we'll set up coffee up here and cookies. And that's just an opportunity for people to go to the bathroom, but also to chat. So I'm gonna be pretty strict on limiting questions and things because we have so many people to get through. If we really get going, then it would take all day, right? And nobody wants to stay here all day. So it's going to feel a bit rushed. So that's just the nature of today. You're not going to learn all the details today, obviously. The idea is just to learn, kind of get an idea of what's going on in these different labs. And then during the coffee breaks, you should take the opportunity to go and speak to the professors who gave their presentation in that previous group if you're interested in their research. Okay, so please, I'm hoping that all of the faculty members will stick around at least through their coffee break following their talk. And so please take the opportunity to talk with them and get to know them and make contact with them. Okay, that's really important. So we'll divide it into 3 groups again. The first one is from 9 to a little bit after 10. Then we have about a half-hour coffee break. And then we'll go about 10:30 to 11:30, and then another half-hour coffee break. And then 12 to about 12:50, and then we'll have lunch. So if we get behind, that's another reason to schedule long coffee breaks, is in case we get behind. So I think everything should work out, but let's try to keep things moving. Any questions about what's going on? Okay. So I'm going to start just because I'm already up here, and then after me, Paolo will follow. Paolo Gondola. Okay, so let me just kind of give you very briefly again what we're doing in my lab. So we're developing. One of the things we do is we develop novel techniques for doing optical imaging with nanoscale resolution. Okay, so this should be a little bit surprising to you to do optics at the nanoscale, and I'll show you how that works. And then we're sort of using this technique and basically to investigate energy and charge transfer in nanoscale systems. And so this is kind of a condensed matter sort of project. Okay, so we have carbon nanotubes you'll recognize and something called the quantum dot. And then we also have a long-standing sort of effort to use this high-resolution microscopy to study biological structure and the relationship between structure and function in biological systems. Okay. So how does this work? So usually if you have just a normal optical microscope, you don't get resolution that's better than about half the wavelength of light. So in the visible range, that means about 300 nanometers or so. So how do we get nanoscale resolution? How do we get resolution that's kind of really at the nanoscale? Well, it turns out if you put a sharp probe in a light field, this is meant to be a laser beam that's focused. If you put a sharp probe, that probe can act like a lightning rod, and it can actually focus the light. Okay? It focuses it to a very small volume, and therefore, if you have a bunch of molecules or some sample, then you can actually sort of differentially illuminate those molecules with your lightning rod, and you can obtain spatial resolution, which is much better than the wavelength. Okay? And so it relies basically on the fact that the tip increases the local fluorescence signal. Okay? Here's kind of what this microscope looks like. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's just an optical system, and you have an atomic force microscope on top, which is what gives you the sharp tip, and some optics, and that's what makes it go. You're welcome to come visit the lab. Here's to show you that in fact you do get very good resolution. So what we did here to test the resolution was we took short pieces of DNA, which we designed to be a very particular length, and we attached small fluorescent molecules on either end. So these glow. The DNA does not glow, but the molecules glow. And we put these on the surface, a bunch of them, and we image them, and you can resolve the 2 ends. Now keep in mind, if you just use a normal microscope, this whole field here these 2 little dots would actually just look like one big, huge dot that you wouldn't be able to resolve. Okay? So we did this for 100 or so molecules, like this, and we showed that in fact we measured the spacing between them, and we showed that in fact we have about 10 nanometer resolution. Okay, so the technique works in a simple way. I mean, it works on relatively simple samples, and the challenge now is to push it into more complex samples. Because of the way that we take our data, and I don't have time to explain this, basically as this probe, this lightning rod, which again is enhancing the optical rate, we oscillate it up and down very fast as we scan it over our sample, and that actually allows us to make three-dimensional images now with nanometer resolution. So for example, here's an object, which this is just a cartoon, this part, but here's real data, and the fluorescence when the tip gets very close to the sample goes up, and so you actually have, this is an image that's in this plane, this XZ plane, and we can even do really three-dimensional imaging. Okay, so you can start to investigate the interaction between the probe and the sample, and you can do this in 3 dimensions with very high resolution. So you can study all kinds of interesting sort of optical effects. Okay? So moving on, we can use this technique to study energy transfer in complex materials. So people have proposed using things like combinations of quantum dots. Quantum dots are these small fluorescent particles made of semiconductor nanocrystals, and a composite material composed of quantum dots and nanotubes, carbon nanotubes, for photovoltaic devices. And there's a number of reasons for this. For example, quantum dots are tunable. Their absorption spectrum is tunable by just tuning their size so that they could be made to absorb the solar spectrum very efficiently. And nanotubes have good electronic properties. Okay, so in order to actually sort of investigate this, you need to study the energy transfer. That is the transfer between the energy which the quantum dots obtain when they get photoexcited and the nanotubes so that you can make a current. Okay, so our approach to this is, instead of looking at something very complicated, is that we basically attach a single nanotube to a single metallic probe, and then we just bring it close to a quantum dot because we have this technique. Okay, so again, we can do the same kind of thing that I showed you before, but now we have a nanotube. And now what we can see is that it's very dark. Here's this little blue spot is where the quantum dot sits. Okay, that's the topography. And you can see this is optical data. You can see it gets very dark when the tip is very close, which means that the quantum dot is actually giving up its energy to the nanotube when it's very close by. And this is more than just a pretty image. This is a huge amount of data in here. So for example, we can actually just look along this direction, this vertical direction, and you can actually make very quantitative measurements on this energy transfer. And you can fit this to models and sort of try to understand what's going on here. You can understand the physics behind it and how efficient this process is. It turns out to be very efficient. If you look, when the nanotube comes very close to the quantum dot, you get nearly 100% energy transfer. And you can study that under the different conditions and for different length nanotubes and so on and so forth, and we're doing that. You can also do something really interesting. For example, quantum dots blink, and you can actually see how these different internal states of the quantum dot, how they couple to the nanotube differentially, and that's kind of an interesting project that we're just sort of starting. So finally, again, this long-standing goal of ours to use this high-resolution microscopy to study proteins embedded in biological membranes. Okay? And so we have a project, we have a collaboration with a biologist here at the University of Utah. And this is, I just put this up there this is a particular system which we're trying to study. And I put this up here because this always makes me laugh. Because this is in many ways, this is a biologist's picture of the structure of this. Okay? It's a cartoon at this point because they don't actually know what the structure is. All they know is that all these proteins, these are all different proteins, this is meant to be a membrane. They know that they kind of get together, but they don't actually know what this particular structure it forms. And it's actually a really important system. And so we're trying to basically measure the structure. And so what you need here is you need to be able to take the individual proteins, the parts, they fit together into some sort of architecture, some sort of network, and you need to be able to resolve individual parts and be able to know what part is what. So you need to be able to know that the different proteins are different species of proteins and not the same protein. And so that's why optics is good, but you still need the nanoscale resolution, and so that's what we're trying to do. We have a new lab because we just moved. I've been here 5 years, but we just moved across the hall. So we have a nice lab that has that can accommodate quite a few students, and it's basically got we've got a nice optical setup. We have a couple of different experimental setups back here. The whole microscope that I showed you sits in this can right there. Okay, so please come visit the lab. And here's the people that do the work. So Chun Gu and Ben Mangum, these folks are just leaving, so Ben and Chun should be graduating very soon. Ben actually has a postdoc already lined up. Eyal Shafran is another senior student in the lab. Ben Martin is a master's student. Carl and Anil are just new students in my lab that started just a few months ago. And Jessica and Charles are some undergraduates that are working for me right now. Okay, so that's all for me. We have about 2 or 3 minutes maybe 2 minutes for questions if anybody has any questions. I know that it's really fast, so it might be too fuzzy. Any questions at all? Yeah.
CNT means carbon nanotube?
Yeah, carbon nanotube, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so let's move on to Paolo Gondolo. Okay, so here's his information. So I'm hoping to put these kinds of things together so that we can maybe, if the speakers are okay with it.
I really need to change my picture.
Carl, let me find you.
You're going a little bit too fast. You want coffee break now?
Okay, so I'm a theorist. It's a beautiful video of a laboratory of Jordan and all. But we don't have a laboratory. Actually, a laboratory is our office. And there's some beautiful pieces of equipment there. And our equipment is our minds. So we can carry our laboratory and equipment with us. Actually, we cannot get rid of our equipment easily.
Good thing that I've got equipment, because my mind is.
Can you check them out and bring home?
Yes, you check it out, you bring it home. Sometimes you forget to bring it home. So my subject is the nature of darkness, this research subject, and here's where you can find me, 458 INSCC. Actually, you can't find me there now because that office is still empty, but I'm going to move up there from the second floor of INSCC. And here's my email if you want to get in touch with me, paolo.gondolo@utah.edu. And my research is funded by NSF and NASA. And so I have some money for students, not a lot of money, because the disadvantage of being a theory student is that you're underpaid. The advantage, however, is that you can work long hours. And if you tend to go to sleep late at night, you're a perfect theorist. You don't need to run to the laboratory at 7 a.m. So these are the data that my research is based on. Cosmology, and there's a bunch of many things. Cosmic micro-background radiation. This is the glow from the Big Bang that we detect. We see galaxies in the universe, small and big, and clusters of galaxies that come together. This is a famous cluster called the Bullet cluster that shows the existence of dark matter. And on the left, all the yellow dots here, each yellow dot is a galaxy in the universe. This is a map, a 3D map of where the galaxies are, and we can extract information from these maps about what is out there. And I'm going to focus on just 2 things. If you look at supernovae and the cosmic micro-background, supernovae are stars that explode and at the end of their life, and they are brighter than a galaxy, so we can see them far, far away. So we find that the universe is expanding faster and faster. We don't really know why, and then you put that term in the equations that you call the cosmological constant. But this is a kind of extra invisible pressure that goes under the name of dark energy. So when you don't know what something is, you give it a nice name, and everybody follows. And the other aspect is that we see galaxies as being faster than gravity or the visible matter can support, and this we see just not in the galaxies, but also in the clusters. There's a lot of this extra source of gravity there. And we call it the dark matter, it's an extra invisible mass. And I'm going to focus on the dark matter. I used to do some research on dark energy, but the subject is very theoretical, it's become very dry. So, because all the possible models have been basically ruled out except for one, and the observers are pinning it down to exquisite precision now to the simplest and most impossible theoretical model, where theory is off by just 40 orders of magnitude. So if you have a good idea, it's okay. But since I don't have any good idea of how to solve a 40 orders magnitude problem, I talk about dark matter. So we know where the dark matter is. We know how much there is. This is thanks to the data. We absolutely have no clue on what it is. So, so what is the nature of dark matter? This is the subject of my research. And physicists, have many ideas. So it's not really true we don't have a clue. We have too many clues. Axioms. These are actually pictures of people who are studying these things. There's Wilczek here on the Nobel Prize. So axioms. Supersymmetric weakly interacting massive particles, and I belong to this crowd. This is the most numerous cloud. Dark matter from extra dimensions. Space and time may have more than 4 dimensions. 3 plus 1 may be 11. So there may be excitations in the extra dimensions. They may be dark and invisible. Maybe excited dark matter. It's a duck-fin binary. He got really excited to see it. There's a lot of publicity about him because he thinks he has found it in the gamma ray data from the Fermi satellite. He has analyzed those images, and so Duck thinks that he has found the dark matter. And he goes around giving a lot of talks. So that's one thing you do as a theorist. You go around the world and give a lot of talks. New force in the dark sector. There's an invader there. I don't know what. Okay. So these are all ideas that need to be tested. And basically three ways of testing these ideas of particles for the dark matter. Accelerators. These are particle accelerators. You produce them in Geneva. Because in Geneva they have the most powerful accelerator. So you produce them there, and you hope it is the dark matter. You actually don't know if it is the dark matter, because you produce something in the laboratory, like neutrinos and other stuff. But neutrinos are not the dark matter. That's where you need a theorist, because the theorist will lead you from what the experimenters observe in Geneva to the content of the universe. They cannot do that. There are other experimentalists, however, who do that. They hope to do that. It's called direct searches for dark matter. They put some crystals or liquids in underground, and they hope that a dark matter particle will scatter in the detector and leave a trace. Not found yet, but then there's indirect methods, all the rest, where the dark matter gives signals come from outer space. Could be gamma rays. Is a artist's drawing of the gamma ray Fermi satellite. Could be neutrinos. This is a person at the South Pole holding a photomultiplier. It could be positrons. This is the Pamela detectors of the balloon flight, and they got some intriguing news. So I'm going to tell you about just 2 topics that we're working on and for which I need help from young people. So cosmic ray positrons. This Pamela detector I just showed you produced the data on the left. So what you see here is the flux of positrons from outer space. We call them cosmic ray positrons. The energy of the positron on the horizontal axis, and not really the flux of positrons, it's the ratio of positrons to electrons in the cosmic rays. And our theorists has produced this black line, but the data show an excess. What could it be due? Maybe some other astrophysical source, maybe dark matter. And on the right is the total flux of electrons and positrons, again as a function of energy. And there's also an excess. You see the revolution by the Fermi satellite this year, the arrow bars in these red points are much tinier than any other previous observation of the electron spectra in cosmic rays. So there's this little bump here, which is also confirmed by another experiment, Hess in Namibia, where they measure the energy at a bit higher range here, and it goes down and it matches the experiment data. So are these excesses due to dark matter? Some people believe they are, like don't think minor. Pulsars of dark matter. On the left is a theoretical model for pulsars. You see you can explain the electron flux, you can explain the positron to electron ratio. On the right is a model for dark matter. You see the line goes through the electron spectrum and through the positron-electron ratio. So now the question is, how do we tell one from the other? What else should we look for? And you can do the simple things in a day or two and figure out what other tests you can make, but the complicated things that the experimentalists would believe, they need a lot of work. So here's what I use. This is a program, it's a computer package for particle dark matter. It's called Dark SUSY. This originally was created for supersymmetry, which it's called SUSY, supersymmetry. We already in version 5, it's publicly available. You go to this URL, you download it, and on a Linux machine it works, even on Windows. And it computes a lot of things like the cosmic density of the dark matter, the accelerator, constraints, direct detection with anything you can think of. And we are now at work, and I need more people to work to extend Dark SUSY to the positron excess. It's a very hot topic, but we are the best in the world with this program. No one else has this numerical tool. This really is the state of the art. It's the benchmark against which all other calculations for particle dark matter are compared. So if this is done quickly in the arc of a year or less, then we'll still be the best, and people will use this tool to study the positron excess and compare. So that's one topic. The other is dark stars. This is very exciting. This is the realization that the first stars to form in the universe may have been powered by dark matter annihilation instead of nuclear fusion. In the sun, the nuclear fusion that powers, it gives the energy. But dark matter annihilation is much more efficient. It gives you 100% of the mass, E equals mc squared. These are dark matter powered stars, for sure dark stars. They're not dark, they shine, and they have interesting consequences. They explain the chemical elements of the old halo stars in our galaxy, which is still a puzzle. But with the dark stars we can explain it. They explain the origin of supermassive black holes in early quasars, which is also a puzzle because there's not enough time to put together a million solar mass black hole by the time we observe them. We observe quasars at very high redshift in cosmology, which was very early in the history of the universe, and the universe was too young to put together those quasars. But with these dark stars, we can explain it. So the key question is, can we find a dark star? How do we go around and find where it is? This is just a bunch of papers on the topic, and we started a new subject here a couple of years ago. And we get in the news, when you do these things, you get in the news and your name appears on what was it, let's say, Spiegel in Germany, and Deseret News here, and then you get on the web, and you get translated in many languages. So that's one advantage of being a theorist, because you can do this with a little amount of work, a computer, pen, and paper, and just on your own, basically, not with 25 collaborators. So the dark stars are here at the beginning of the universe, after the end of the dark ages, the first objects that shine. And for kind of give you a hint of what kind of work we have open, here are the questions. How do dark stars ionize the universe? We don't really know. We're just working on it. I'm collaborating with somebody in University of San Francisco and Southern California, University of Southern California. How do dark stars change the production of heavy elements and the chemical balances of the oldest stars? So we need a detailed calculation of that. We have just, works more or less. There's no real number. Do the stars evolve into supermassive black holes that grow into high-redshift quasars? Same kind of thing. I advertised this, they do, but we know with order of magnitude, we don't have the right numbers in front. Can dark stars power gamma ray bursts at high redshift? This is an idea we have. So you come up with an idea and then we need to work it out quantitatively, because physics is still a quantitative science, at least I think. How can we observe dark stars? Maybe with James Webb Space Telescope, which is a successor of the Hubble Space Telescope, maybe with neutrinos and gamma rays. So these are all open questions. So you see what happens, that these questions are the interface of physics and astronomy and astrophysics. So you need to have collaborators with expertise in different fields. And you end up working with people at other universities. And that's a big help when you're looking for a job, because you're already known outside your little University of Utah physics department. You can get letters of recommendation from co-authors of yours who are at the University of Michigan or in other places. So if you want to know more about what we do, you're welcome to join us at our weekly group meeting, Wednesdays 3 p.m., 465 INSSC. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Paolo. Okay. Next up is Eugene Mishenko, and he is going to give a Blackboard talk.
Yes, let me bring you out of darkness. Can we have some? I think I can use this one.
Second now.
I'm a theorist as well, and so everything that goes about being underpaid and spending long hours still wise. I can also add that one of my previous students wrote 3 papers, survived the same number of numerous breakdowns, finally landed a job as a postdoc. My other student, after writing the same number of papers, decided that it's better to escape, so he is now at a different university. So you got the idea. It's interesting, but sometimes it's tough. I'm working on low-dimensional interacting electron systems, much more mundane stuff than the universe. And I'll give you just an example of a problem I've been thinking about for the last couple of years, and it's related to graphene. And graphene is a 2-dimensional allotrope of carbon. It's arranged in a honeycomb lattice, and it's simple and beautiful example of a electronic system. The lattice structure leads to honeycomb reciprocal lattice with a honeycomb representing Brilliant zone. And what's interesting about it is spectrum, its band structure is almost like a band structure, almost like a spectrum of relativistic particles, but in a 2-dimensional crystal system, and with velocities which are 100 times smaller than the speed of light. And low energy states are Dirac cones with the spectrum very similar to electron-positron spectrum, except for the value of the velocity. If you calculate the density of states, how many states are available for a given energy, then you see an interesting thing here. So those of you who know about density of states, how do you think it behaves close to the Dirac point? That's how many states you have for a given energy. Well, it's actually vanishing at this Dirac point linearly, no matter if you are, so this is the same velocity, whether you are above or below the Dirac point. So you have very little states right at the Dirac cone. And that's where you have intrinsic graphene. If you don't have any impurities, the Fermi level is sitting right here. So you don't have any number of available states. Then you would ask a question: what is the conductivity of graphene if no states are available? And the answer is, surprisingly, conductivity remains finite despite the vanishing of the density of states. So this is easy to understand if you bear me for a little quantum mechanical calculation. So the Hamiltonian of this system is relativistic Hamiltonian with Pauli matrices working in a pseudo-spin space rather than true space. And if you add electric field by means of vector potential, and you know that vector potential is related to electric field as the derivative with time. So for a fixed frequency, that gives you, for your matrix element, being inversely proportional to the frequency of the applied external field. So that's E times velocity times electric field and inversely proportional to omega. Let's say the direction of electric field is in x. So as you go to lower frequencies and you look at the conductivity, what you are actually looking at are the transitions from a field lower cone to an empty upper cone. And as the frequency gets smaller, so you test very little states near the vicinity of the Dirac point, your decreasing density of states is compensated by the divergent matrix element. So the probability of transition, as you know, is proportional to the square of the matrix element, or the transition from initial to the final state squared, times the density of states at that particular energy corresponding to half the frequency. So the matrix element is proportional to E squared, electric field, omega squared, and times the density of states, which is omega divided by E squared, 80 bar squared. So you see that one power frequency drops out, and what you get is E squared over omega h bar squared E squared. So that's the probability of each transition to happen. Now, how much energy is absorbed in each transition? So how much power is generated by the electric field? Well, you have to multiply the probability of transition by the corresponding energy, which is h bar omega. And then you see that the remaining power frequency drops out, and the fact that the density of states is vanishing at the Dirac point is compensated by the divergent matrix element. Now, if this is a dissipated power, what is the conductivity? Do you remember the Joule heat law? It's conductivity times electric field squared. Current times voltage. So for the conductivity, you obtain E squared over h bar up to some coefficient which is equal to 1/4. And the conductivity of clean intrinsic graphene is of the order of the conductance quantum and contains only fundamental quantities. Now, you can measure this conductivity by many different experiments, and the one experiment that I love the most is a suspended sheet of graphene under the laser radiation. The laser radiation is going perpendicular to the graphene plane. Some of the radiation is reflected, some is absorbed, and some is getting through. Now, the transmission coefficient of the two-dimensional system is uniquely related to its conductivity by the following relation. You can solve it, and this is a electrodynamic problem, and you see that the transmission of the graphene sheet is determined by the ratio of conductivity to the speed of light, and this is nothing but the fine structure constant. So the fine structure constant determines transmission coefficient of a mundane condensed matter system. And the experiments verified this theoretical prediction, not my prediction, with great precision, 97.7%. So it's much better than 1% precision. And the questions that I've been working for during the last couple of years are the following. Well, first question is, why such a simple picture, which I can explain to you in 5 minutes, works? So electrons are strongly interacting particles. Coulomb interaction is extremely strong. So why then no interaction effects? And if you think about why there is rarely any interaction effects in mundane three-dimensional metals, that's because there is lots of screening by other electrons. Now, in graphene, there is no states available, there is no screening by other electrons, so interaction effect should be huge. Now, the question is, why don't you see any of those interactions? And that's the question that I think I resolved over the past couple of years, and at least gave a mathematical explanation to why the interactions are weak, if not simple, clear physical picture. And the second question is a more recent one. Look, the matrix element is diverging. So you know that this is all perturbation theory. Perturbation theory works only if matrix element is less than something. And that something in this particular case is the lifetime of these states, electrons and holes, in the two cones. And if you make frequency too small, so that matrix element becomes greater than the inverse lifetime of those states, then this whole approach shouldn't work. And then you have a nonlinear response. And if you know about optics, then you know about phenomena which is called Rabi oscillations in optics. And the same thing happens here. You have two levels, one in the electron cone, the other is in the hole cone. But if the lifetime is very long and your linear response theory doesn't work, it means that after this transition, the electron can still go back and forth, executing Rabi oscillations. If the lifetime is very short, then the electron excited quickly is lost from the excited state, and the energy is dissipated. Now the question is, what happens if the applied electric field, laser radiation, for example, is so strong that it beats the lifetime, so you can see multiple oscillations back and forth. And it's the question that I've been looking at over the last several months. Okay, I guess my time is up. I hope I bored you long enough so that you can now get some enlightenment from another theorist. And if you have any questions, you can still.
Any questions? So everybody understood everything.
Pass out the test.
Yeah, there's a quiz upstairs before we finish, so don't forget to get that on your way out.
Before we get any lunch.
in also low-dimensional systems, and where we expect strong effects of interactions on strongly interacted electrons, and in particular also of, this is a huge broad topic, but I'm particularly interested currently in subset of which are quantum spin systems, so this is still electrons, but I'm interested in a much simpler problem when electrons are fixed in place, but their spins can do the motion. So in these questions, and I'll describe a couple of questions shortly. But before I do that, so I just wanted to say I will not attempt to describe what I do in any significant details, but I would like to point out to this web page, my research web page, where some time ago I tried to put together what was current by about a year and a half ago. So different research topics, and the links are active, and so if you click there you can get not only references to relevant works, but some kind of attempted brief explanation of the topics that are listed. So doing that, if you're interested, get a good idea of what I do and where my research is going. So starting a little bit with a history. So I, for first 3 years when I was here, so I was lucky to work with two bright guys. So Janmin San, who was a student and is now postdoc at the University of Indiana, and Subhash Harai, who came to a postdoc and worked with me and with Eugene, and is now postdoc at UC Illinois. And so with them, we hooked up a little toy problem, which turned out to be very rich. And in that problem, electrons were moving, but moving in one dimension, so it was a problem of quantum wire, subject to magnetic field, which is simple, and also spin-orbit interaction, something which is one of the active topics in modern research. And plus interactions between electrons. And in playing with this problem, we have figured several unexpected things, of which I like most. I just advertise, so I will describe the one problem which I'm working on, but in a couple of minutes. But so in a way for advertising, you stumbled upon very simple, almost classical effect, which now, however, is not being explained, written anywhere by anyone. And that effect is the analog of van der Waals interaction, which you probably have seen in quantum mechanics course, and which describes how two neutral atoms interact, because you can virtual dipole transition. So one electron, say you start with two atoms in ground states, and then one electron goes in one in excited states, that creates dipole moment, which polarizes next atom. This to stop, and so it's known under the name of van der Waals interaction. Important in many systems. Goes as a 6 power 1 inverse of 6 power distance atoms. So if you add to this same setup spin-orbit interaction, so that every electron, each of the electrons that you have, has spin, and that spin is coupled to orbital motion, then out of such simple calculation, you end up with effective coupling between spins, which does not require electron tunneling. So it's kind of van der Waals, this classical interaction between electron spins, and which is really bad news for quantum computers, but good news for us because it's kind of fun. So, so that this really high-vision collaboration with these guys, and my current one of current project is with Shane, who is here, and we are looking on a very different problem, but that's getting closer to my current interest. So we are looking for magnetic system, antiferromagnet in 2 dimensions, and there are many experimental realizations of such systems, and spins sit at the vertices of the lattice, such as tiny segment of the lattice is shown. And important is that it's you see triangles, so each spin is coupled to 6 neighbors in this triangular fashion. And this is a simple but extremely well studied and long studied problem, still not solved and understood completely. And so this model has very interesting property, even on classical level, and that's what Shane is doing. So you start at 0. You ask how magnetization, you apply magnetic field, and ask how magnetization behaves as a function of field. And it's a straight line. You take derivative of magnetization over magnetic field, you end up with some constant value. You do the same calculation at finite temperature for classical model, and so here you see this constant, so there's constant slope, and then something happens at intermediate fields. So fields are units of exchange constant. So something happens, the slope suddenly drops, then rises up, and then it's constant again. And so what this signifies non-monotonic behavior of derivative of the magnetization is appearance of a very peculiar spin state where 2/3 of the spins in the system point along the field, 1/3 opposite to the field, and such structure is called up or down state. And the width of this dip is controlled by temperature. It's completely universal. So at 0 temperature, it's 0, it's absent. You heat up system and you expect it to be more disordered, but instead what happens, entropy of this state is so high that at intermediate temperatures you stabilize this linear state. So it's entropic effect of finite temperature in complicated system. And so to give you an idea of what I'm thinking at the moment, also I will spend 3 minutes on this problem. So I'm thinking of Bose-Einstein condensation of spin waves or magnets. So you know about Bose-Einstein condensation, and in the field of cold atoms, it's extremely important topic of research. That's what we do. But magnetic systems provide another system where condensation can be studied, and it's extremely interesting. So we start again with Heisenberg model of some type, and this J, so exchange interaction between spin at site I and J, usually short range, but we can make it long range to consider. And we apply magnetic field V times S along the direction. Okay. So if we apply extremely strong magnetic field, then problem becomes trivial because all spins point in the same direction. Completely polarized spins. Okay. And you ask what is excitation in such a simple state? Well, this excitation you obtain if you flip one spin, create a spin down state, and give it some momentum so you make plane wave out of spin down state. This is your particle. Okay? Okay. And this particle has some energy. But at very high fields, this energy, it's a function of momentum, but it's always greater than 0. As you start decreasing magnetic field, so now going from high fields to lower fields, at some point you hit 0 in this dispersion. And so when you hit 0, or you say the chemical effective chemical potential, which is controlled by the field which fully polarizes spins minus current on the actual field. So when that becomes 0, you have bosons, which are these particles of spin down plane waves. So this happens at some momentum, and you have boson at 0 energy, so you have condensation of them. Momentum at which they condense determines magnetic structure in the following way. So if your spectrum is such that just you have single minimum at some point in momentum space, then you can translate this into spin structure, and it's very simple. You have magnetization along field axis of the applied magnetic field, so rho is parameterized proportional to the field. And transverse components that is perpendicular to the direction of the field, you have simple periodic function. So what if you think so spin is think of it as unitary with 3 components. So one component is constant, and other 2 components depend on position, r position in space. So that position changes periodically. So what your spin does is you go from one point to another, it moves like this. So such structure is called umbrella state or cone state. So the spins form these structures. If it happens, which this often happens in 2-dimensional magnets, there is interesting geometry, that there are at least two non-equivalent points at which spectrum of your particles touches 0 as you go down in a magnetic field. Then you end up with very unusual, much more unusual state when component of spin along the magnetic field direction is not constant, it is modulated in space with twice the period in which transverse component is modulated. This state, if you look into the literature, is also currently known by the name of supersonic. So in this state, spin along the field, magnitude of the spin is not constant, it changes in periodic fashion with some period, and perpendicular to it, one of the components perpendicular to it changes twice as slow. So this is very peculiar state. And then you can ask how this state changes into that, and that is then you study, leads you to study phase transition at 0 temperature, which are known as quantum phase transitions. So this is a sketch of a problem of which one of the problems I'm working on currently. And so if you're interested and you ask me, approach me and try. Let's say you want to try, and I'll give you a problem. And you solve it, come back and I'll give you an answer. And in a few years' time, you solve enough problems. And you'll have the thank you. So questions?
Okay, everybody understood that one too. Okay. All right, so the next 2 talks are given by members of our 2 high-energy astrophysics groups, which are more than just that are just represented here. So we'll start with Stefan Lebwek, and then we'll move on to Doug Bergman.
Hello, good morning. Nice. So, yes, with David Kida, we work in the field of gamma ray astronomy. For this, we use these very large telescopes that you see in this picture. Each telescope is 12 meters in diameter, so really big instruments. And as a I should stay here with the computer probably. As a consequence, it's a big experiment that is operated by a large number of people. So if you were to join a group, in fact, you would be joining this quite big collaboration that counts close to 100 people distributed in 20 institutions, mostly in the US, but also some in Canada and in England and in Ireland. It's quite a friendly group of people, so you should not be impressed, but it's clear that our students, they are constantly working with people who are not in Utah. They always have exchanges with people everywhere mostly in the US, probably, and Canada. Still, we have a local group where you see myself in the background here. David Kida, since David Kida is the chair of the department, he's more like one of Eugene's electrons. He's in the conducting band, while I would be more like one of Oleg's electron. It's been going up and down in my office in South Physics. We have a bunch of grad students. You know Michel. Maybe the best way is to talk with them. Gary, Paul, and we always have a team of undergraduate students who are working at analyzing data on a daily basis. Every night we take data, and we have to analyze these data, compare our results to the results that are obtained by our colleagues in other groups in the US. We're quite a big group in the collaboration. Maybe one of the bigger groups in collaboration. We work in at least with our local group, we are not very directive as far as topics are going. We like people to be interested and come to see us, saying, I would like to look into this. Can you help me on how I should proceed, or what do I need to do to get this analysis to work, or can I calculate this in another way? We like people to be leading their own work and use us as a resource. As an example of this, Gary recently was working on the observations that we made of this object, which you see here. It's a supernova remnant, which is of great interest for gamma ray astronomy, because one of the big questions that we have in gamma ray astronomy is to identify sites of cosmic ray acceleration, cosmic rays such as studied by doubts of just of different energies. And these type of objects are excellent candidates for this. So Gary has been producing this type of sky maps and comparing them to what is observed at other wavelengths, especially in the radio. Recently also we observed another type of object, which is what we call an X-ray binary. So it's a regular star which has a compact companion. And as the two objects orbit each other, they interact, and apparently they produce radiation of very high energy. And so Paul Nunez started studying how this high energy radiation propagates through the radiation of the regular star, and how much this radiation absorbs the high energy gamma rays that we see, causing the modulation in the flux that we observe as the two objects orbit each other. Michel Gouy is working on an object that is dear to me. I've been studying this galaxy for the last 10 years or so. This is NX7. It's a huge galaxy at the center of a nearby very large cluster galaxy. You see a picture of that galaxy invisible here, and you see a jet, which is the first jet that was ever observed at the beginning of the 20th century. And this jet is powered by the accretion on the black hole, which is at the center of this object. And recently we made these observations here as a function of time. We have the flux that we observed in very high energy gamma rays. I did not mention we are working at 1 TeV of energy as a function of time. And you see that we had some level of gamma ray activity, and then we observed a flare, and then we did not get any more signal. And at the same time of this flare, we had colleagues who were observing the same object in X-ray and also in the radio, and their observations combined with ours made us think that this radiation, the high energy radiation that we're observing, is really coming from the very close vicinity of this black hole. So with Stefan Vincent, who is a postdoc working with us, and also with Michel, we are working at trying to explain this very high energy radiation in terms of particles being accelerated in the magnetic field structures very, very close to the horizon of that black hole. We are trying to develop a model to describe this emission. Recently, gamma ray astronomy at those energies have been, we have done huge progresses in terms of the number of sources that we have detected emitting gamma rays at such extreme energies, and as a consequence, people both in the US and in Europe are now planning to construct much larger projects than the one you have seen on the first slide, with just 4 telescopes. So in Europe, they are working on a project that involves something like 97 telescopes covering a square kilometer, In the US, we are working on a project of which we count 36 telescopes that the design is quite different. I'm just coming here, actually stepping out from a meeting of this AGIS collaboration, but there are also CTA members who are at this meeting, so we are exchanging ideas and strategies on how to construct something that large and how to be operated. I don't think that's probably the time scales for this are probably not appropriate for a student to start working on this, but that certainly would be easy to get involved in this type of very international collaboration. A little bit on the side, we are running a project. You see a picture of that project here, which is just 35 miles west from here in Grantsville. These are two telescopes similar to the telescopes that we use for gamma astronomy, except that they are quite smaller. And we deployed them to use them as a prototype platform to test an idea to observe stars. So this is not about gamma astronomy anymore, but we just had this idea of by using the same type of instruments, we could make stellar observations which are not possible at the moment. I cannot get into the details of this, but that's another opportunity to work with us on some experimental project. Maybe the last point is that, getting back to gamma astronomy really, it's very clear that our observations in gamma astronomy to reach an understanding of the objects that we observe, we need to collaborate with people observing the same objects at different wavelengths. And so we work a lot with the Gamma Ray Fermi telescope, the Swift Gamma Ray telescope as well, the Chandra telescope in X-ray. We work with VLA, a radio observatory. And of course, now I told you about these AGIS and CTA collaborations preparing the future for Gamma Ray astronomy. So we are embedded in all sorts of very international collaborations, which certainly provide many opportunities of postdoctoral positions once you graduate. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you. Okay. So now we're going to move on to another high energy astrophysics group.
Okay, hello. There we go. So I'm from the Cosmic Ray group here at Utah, and just came here actually from Rutgers. Anyway, so here are there's I guess currently 5 faculty members in the Cosmic Ray group. Some listed there. The Gamma Ray group has the chair. We have the dean, so he's a little more removed from research. Let's see, Gordon, Thompson, and I both arrived this year. We were at Rutgers previously. And Charlie Ray and Wayne Springer. Wayne is doing a lot of astronomy work now with the telescope in Frisco Peak. And we have a bunch of research faculty as well. I realized I don't have a nice picture of the Cosmic Ray group or a list of the graduate students in the talk, but okay. Anyway, so the Cosmic Ray group at Utah has actually a fairly long history dating back to the 70s. And one of the early projects was the FLISA experiment to look for cosmic rays with highest energies. Here's a picture of it. This is from Dugway Proving Grounds, about 100 miles southwest of here. It's on a hill, and each one of these has a mirror in it and collects light onto the phototube. And that was the prototype. Actually, was in New Mexico in 1975, and then in the 80s it was built as shown here, and it ran until 1992. And that was followed up by the high-res experiment, high-resolution fly's eye. The prototype, which, so here you see the old fly's eye tubes. They built bigger mirrors and put them in buildings, and it looks like that. That's the prototype. And then the full high-res was built later, and it ran basically the early part of this decade. Here's a picture of the second site on another hill. There's 2 sites, so you can see the cosmic rays in stereo. And so this is about 12 kilometers away. The other site is over there somewhere. And then finally, our current project is the telescope array project. And I also realized I didn't put the collaboration list in this, so you'll have to forgive me for that. Utah, now that there's not much of a Rutgers group, is really the only U.S. part of that, but there's a very large Japanese contingent who built much of it. Okay, so what are cosmic rays? Cosmic rays are high energy particles from space, and they're ionizing particles, usually is part of the definition, and they hit the Earth's atmosphere. We're actually interested in the very highest energy of those, which is the highest that's ever been seen is 3 times 10 to the 20th eV, and that's about, I can't remember, tens of joules of energy in a single microscopic particle. And as such, they're the highest energy cosmic messengers that you could think of doing astronomy or astrophysics with that are available. When they hit the atmosphere, they create a shower of particles they interact with the molecules of the atmosphere and make more particles in the interaction. The first interaction maybe is a few hundred particles. Those all interact, and that creates a shower, and that's actually what we observe. And so we use the whole atmosphere, or some large segment of the atmosphere, as our detector. The shower particles ionize the air. That causes fluorescence, which we observe, and the shower eventually hits the ground, and we can observe the particles at the ground, and we use both those techniques. Where do cosmic rays come from? Well, at slightly lower energies than we look. They may come from supernova remnants, and Stefan showed a supernova remnant. Here's another picture of one. Actually, all the action here happens at the shock front at the edge of supernova remnant for accelerated cosmic rays. AGN, that's the same picture that Stefan just showed of M87. And you have material streaming out here, so again, you have a shock front. So cosmic rays may be accelerated to these high energies at best place. Or another thing is Wolf-Rayet A stars have a very copious stellar wind. These Wolf-Rayet A stars are stars 100 times solar mass, roughly, which spit off a lot of their solar atmosphere in the stream before they eventually go supernova, which only is a few hundred million years. Okay, so at the highest energy, what do we want to do with cosmic rays? There's really 3 main topics. We want to measure the spectrum, the energy spectrum, because that actually tells us a lot. It tells that, it gives us a lot of hints that we can try to decode. You see a given spectrum, and they have to be accelerated to that spectrum, so there's an input spectrum based on what your acceleration mechanism is. But then that's modified by everything that it passes through on the way to you. So if at a given energy, say, actually the given energy 6 times 10 to the 19th, you can create, the particle goes through the cosmic microwave background and is energetic enough to create the delta resonance. So the cosmic ray loses energy very fast. That has an effect on the spectrum, and it basically cuts it off. Other things like cosmic rays in the galaxy are confined by magnetic fields, but they're less confined at higher energies because they have higher rigidity, and so that also changes the spectrum. Second topic, composition. Well, what exactly are they? Are they protons? Are they heavier nuclei like iron? They could be anything in between. Very high energy photons will look very similar. And finally, where do they come from? Anisotropy. Because they're charged at lower energies, the magnetic fields change the direction of propagation so that you can't see directly back. But at the very highest energies, depending on what the actual extragalactic magnetic fields are, they may point back within a few degrees of where they come from, so you can try to do astronomy with these particles at that highest energy. And if they're photons, of course, they do point straight back. We can also imagine detecting neutrinos creating showers, which would also point back. So here's the telescope array. I believe our group has the largest lab of any of the physics group here. This array here is about 900 square kilometers. It has 2 parts. An array of detectors on the ground, represented by the red dots here, separated by 1.2 kilometers, and then 3 fluorescence detector sites which overlook that same area. This is Route 6 here, and just off the picture here is Delta, Utah. So this is about 2 hours drive south of Salt Lake City. So it's a hybrid detector, as I said, 507 surface detectors, which here's one on the ground. This is kind of an old picture. They look slightly different than that for the most part, so that one probably is still there. You have scintillators here in this iron box, and it's powered by a solar detector, sends its data out on the radio detector, and this is how we deploy them. We truck them all out to one spot and put them out with a helicopter. We put out all 500 basically in 2 months in 2007. So helicopter was an effective way to do that. The other half of the hybrid is the 3 fluorescence detectors. Sorry, 1, 2, 3. These two, well, all the surface detectors were built by our Japanese collaborators, and the 2 fluorescence detectors were. This we provided, and it was basically the old high-res mirrors. I'll show that in a second. Actually, this is a picture I made using Google Earth and a model of the detector there. And so this is the background is actually an image of the ground. But here's what it looks like in real life. So you have mirrors. They collect the fluorescence light and shine it onto photomultiplier tube cluster, which is in that box there. And here I have a picture, close-up of the mirror, and the array of photomultiplier tubes that we see the image on. Here's the site provided by HiRes. These were the same mirrors as used at HiRes as it was being built. There's no clusters there yet, but when the clusters are in place, they will start like that. So here's the sort of analyses we do. For fluorescence detector, you see the light coming along the sky. So it looks like this, basically. And I've color-coded that with time, and the size is the signal we see. So basically, you see a line in the sky. The time it comes lets you know the geometry, so you can fit that, and how different that is from a line tells you what the angle is. And you can see that there's not great ability to tell that from the line, but if you also know when it hit the ground, you can get much better resolution. So using both detectors together helps you in that way. Once you know its geometry, you can calculate how much light there was at a given point. So you see how the shower develops, it grows, but then eventually the shower particles are too low in energy to create more shower particles, and so then it dies away. And from that, you can determine so that the integral under here is basically how much energy was deposited in the atmosphere, which tells you the energy of the initial grain. For the surface detector, you see a footprint on the ground. So here you see the size of these circles is how much hit in each one of those detectors for a given event. This is a very high energy event, somewhere in the upper half of the 10 to the 19th decade. And it's color-coded again with time, so you can see that it's sort of moving this way from the blues to the reds. And the black X there is the, just using this data, what the reconstruction of the direction is. The red is if we use the hybrid, because this was seen in fluorescence as well. And I thought I had another picture, but that's all right. So in conclusion, so telescope's array, we're observing the highest energy cosmic rays available. We measure the spectrum, composition, and anisotropy of those highest energy cosmic messages that hit the Earth. It's a deployed experiment. We're taking data. We expect to run for another, for the next decade, essentially. We're also planning, as a more U.S. and Utah project, a low energy extension to work in conjunction with this. And I think we're recruiting 1 or 2 graduate students currently for, in the next few months we'll be looking for another graduate student. Thanks.
Any questions for Doug? Okay, so let's take about a 15-minute break. There's coffee and cookies right out here. And then let's meet back here at 10:30, please, and we'll start the next session. Thank you.